ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and welcome Nigel Grace.
Thank you so much for that lovely round of applause. I'm so happy to be back here again. The title of my talk this time is, as you can see on the screen behind me, about ancient technology before the last ice age. And I'm talking about the Bosnian Pyramids revealed. But let's start in that beautiful verdant valley just outside of Visico, a short distance away from Sarajevo, and standing there, looking very dominantly down upon the village of Visico, are these extraordinary and enigmatic structures covered in green foliage and forests that have this shape of a perfect pyramid. And you know what? It's a wonderful experience. This is me a couple of years ago. To be a part of this incredible project. Because, you know, as we're working with our hands, our minds, it's in a way that we create an energetic bridge, or perhaps we can say a spiritual bridge, between our culture today and the cultures of the ancient past. And we get the feeling that in the distant past, that perhaps now has been obliterated with the waters of the melting ice caps and ice ages, that our ancestors, our forefathers and foremothers, had a very advanced knowledge and consciousness, and they knew how to align certain architectures, certain structures, to enhance and magnify the subtle and invisible energies of the earth, of the planet. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. But first of all, I want to acknowledge the presence of someone who's been with me in every talk that I've been giving in the last 5 years. And this being is a small stone. Here it is in my hand. When I was first in Bosnia, I was walking over the pyramid, over the concrete, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw this small piece kind of shining or glistening at me, and I walked straight past it, and I felt this tug. So I walked back, and there it was, asking for me to pick it up. And ever since then, I've had it in my left hand as I was speaking. And all I need to do, my job here today, is just to be present and receptive to the thoughts that come into my mind, which I believe are transmitted via the presence of this small stone with its beautiful crystal to these ancient civilizations and structures. And of course, you might say, well, this man is a bit silly because he's talking to a stone. But when you get down to the quantum level of life, nothing is inanimate, everything is connected. For those of you who don't know about the pyramids, this is the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun that we're looking at. And just like the pyramids in Egypt and Mexico, this pyramid has been designed to align with the cardinal points in complete perfection. Well, what do I mean by that? This is a topographical map of the same structure, and we can see clearly 3 sides that form a perfect triangle. The Bosnian Institute of Geodesics has actually measured this to have equal sides of 365 meters and inner angles of 60 degrees. So it in fact is a perfect triangle on each side. But the most interesting thing is that the northern side perfectly aligns with the northern star by an almost impossible accuracy of just 12 seconds deviation. And I believe that this is because in the ancient past, what was really important was the cosmic cross, rather like we have the Christian cross today. The cosmic cross represented the 4 quarters of the sky at night, the universe, the Milky Way. And so to align the terrestrial structures, such as the pyramids, with the cosmic cross was very important. The best way to look at this structure is from a small aeroplane. So here we can see we're just coming round, and there you see formed a perfect circle with the edges of the pyramid. Now, when you see this for the very first time from an aeroplane, not only does it look like a perfect pyramidal structure, but also the power that it emanates is quite enormous. And just over the valley is another very important pyramid that we call the Pyramid of the Moon. And you can see here, just on the right of this tree, it has a tabletop to it, rather like the step pyramids in Egypt. What is really amazing about these pyramids is the fact that whoever designed them and their place aligned them perfectly so that the movement of the moon and the sun complemented each other. We found a couple of years ago that there's a certain day every year where the setting sun behind the Pyramid of the Sun will cause the shadow of the Pyramid of the Sun to eclipse the Pyramid of the Moon. Here it is. And there the sun now rests on the top of the plateau of the Pyramid of the Moon. So if we were to have a look at this on the map, we will find, first of all, these 2 pyramids at the top, the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon. And at the bottom here, we have one more structure that we've called the Pyramid of the Bosnian Dragon. And in the center that we see here, that is just in between there, is the Bosnian Pyramid of Love. And often we find that the energies of the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon are joined together by the Pyramid of Love and then brought down to the Pyramid of the Bosnian Dragon and then entered into the planetary Earth. But here's what we're doing. Slowly we are removing the surface soil to expose or find what's underneath the soil, what's underneath the vegetation. And here you see we're working in 35 degrees. The interesting thing is the higher you get up the pyramid, the energy changes, the air changes. So you can be working for 3 hours in the sun near the top of the pyramid, and you don't feel so tired as you would just working 1 hour lower down in the pyramid. And what we've actually found is this amazing concrete that's covering the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun in different layers. We have actually dug down about 3 to 4 feet, 4.5 feet. So in geological time or archaeological time, we assume that this surface level that we're looking at here was exposed to the air probably about 10 to 12,000 years ago. When we look at this pyramidal concrete in more detail, we actually start to notice slabs. Obviously, with the passing of time, these slabs have become broken, and also the local people have used dynamite to use it for their local homes. But still, we see that the alignment of the concrete is very much still intact. We've also found very clear manufacture of straight edges and right angles of concrete placed in different layers and then another structure on top. Similarly with the Pyramid of the Moon, the red squares shows where we're excavating, we have found this beautiful promenade of sandstone blocks on the outside of the pyramid. They're about 1 meter thick. Here's near the top of the Pyramid of the Moon, and here's where we've actually removed different levels of the concrete so that we could find out how many levels are there? How deep does it go? Does it go right down to the bottom? Is this a pyramid that's been built from scratch? Or is it a natural hill that's been fashioned to take on the proportions of a perfectly formed pyramid? And actually what we've found so far are many layers of concrete blocks, about 1 meter thick. And in between each layer of concrete, we find clay, just pure clay, the plasticine clay. Now, the wonderful thing about that, whoever designed these pyramids, is that the natural clay absorbs motion and absorbs energy. And that's one reason we think why these pyramids have withstood earthquakes over time. And in fact, they have also survived the terrible Bosnian War that took place very recently. And in fact, I heard stories during the war in Bosnia that people would see these mortars coming over and exploding on the sides of the pyramid, and there was a deep thud and then an echo coming from inside. And so they wondered, isn't it funny how when the mortars go off on that slope, they have this particular deep echo coming from inside? But you may remember that the title of this talk is all about technology. It's all about discovering the ancient technology that may have existed in the previous ice age. And in this talk, I'm going to be describing and reporting upon some of the technologies that we have used to try and unravel or discover or uncover these ancient technologies. But first, how do we know how old these pyramids are? Very luckily, about 2 years ago, one of the volunteers on the archaeological dig found, while we were excavating the northern slope of the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, 2 leaves, 2 humble leaves that must have fallen or been blown in the wind from a nearby tree. And these leaves had been fossilized over the ages. Now, this is a wonderful find because it means that we have some carbon that can be dated. And so these 2 leaves were very carefully placed on some stone. They were sent off to the carbon dating service in Kiev. And to our great surprise, we found out that these leaves are 29,200 years old, plus or minus 400 years, before the present era. So what does this mean? It means that the pyramids were there at the time that the leaves fell on them. So we would call this actually the minimum age of the pyramids. Maybe they're even older. At least they were standing there during the meltwater floods that came from the melting of the ice caps, the glaciers, during what is called the Heinrich events, H3, 31,000 years ago, before the present era. And this was the time when there was the last glacial, the very large glacial melt. So the waters must have been rushing through these, and perhaps the pyramid, the lower pyramid, could be actually submerged in water, but somehow this leaf managed to settle on the side of the pyramid, and then through the ages was subsequently covered with soil and rain and silt. And today we have uncovered it. So we know that we're dealing with a time period beyond history, beyond our knowledge. And so what is really fascinating for me is that if you were to go to archaeologists or historians and say, how can we understand our ancient history? They would point us towards ancient Greece, of ancient Rome. They would point us towards ancient Egypt and the pyramids there. And perhaps even earlier than that, they would point us 8,000 years ago to the city-states of Jericho and Ur. And they would say to us that this is the cradle of civilization about 8,500 years ago. Anything beyond that is just prehistory. There's nothing much happened before that. Perhaps some hunters and gatherers, very primitive, just trying to eke out a survival or an existence. Now that was shattered a few years ago with the discovery in South Turkey of Göbekli Tepe, or the hill of Göbekli, which took us back to 12,500 years ago. This was very inconvenient for the archaeologists, and they say it shouldn't be there, but it is. But now we have gone back to 31,000 years before the present time. Incidentally, some of the more enlightened archaeologists are now saying that they believe that the Sphinx in Egypt also dates back to 31,000 years ago, as evidenced by the tremendous amount of water erosion at the basis of the Sphinx in Egypt. But as my small stone is telling me, we need to look more deeply or more closely at the concrete itself. And we find that it's absolutely filled with crystal, quartz crystal, pure quartz crystal. And actually, this is a very powerful little stone. I showed it to someone who really understands these things, and they said, "Did you know that you're walking around with a stone, and he wants you to know that he has a name?" And I said, "Well, please tell me, what's the name of this little stone?" And he said, "His name is Emissary, and that's why he's come to you, so the ancient knowledge can be placed in my brain when I'm talking, or if I'm holding this in my left hand." Now you think I'm really silly. The interesting thing is that after working in 35 to 40 degrees for 6 hours in the day, the best thing you can do working on the concrete, excavating it and cleaning it, is just to lie down for about 10 to 20 minutes, as this lady from Spain is doing. It completely recharges your energy. It's quite amazing. It removes the tiredness. You can actually feel the energy from coming into your back, which is why I suppose that it's a great tourist area. These guys are from South Korea. But seriously, taking a piece of this concrete, I told you we were going to use science today, is that taking this sample and not saying where we found it from, or where we found, or what it actually is, whether it is concrete or not. We sent it to the University of Zenica for analysis. And they, first of all, said, "Well, where exactly did you find this?" I said, "Well, do you really need to know? Can't you just tell us?" But we did tell them, and then they said, "That's impossible." But then we did also send it to Davoditz, Professor Davoditz, who's a remarkably astute member of the Association of Egyptologists, and he said, I performed electro-microscopic analysis of the sample, and I propose that the geopolymer chemistry that was used to make this ancient concrete. So there it is, that this is not natural, it is in fact artificially made. And it's very powerful. It's also extremely strong. It has the ability to withstand shattering or water absorptions many times more than modern concrete that's made in Germany, say, today. Perhaps it's been hardened over time, but there's something about the way it's been made and its constitution that is almost impossible to penetrate. Whether we're using drills or pickaxes, we can't get through this concrete. And personally, I believe that is because inside the pyramid, there is such huge energy that it must be encased and protected. I actually have recently become involved with the science of dowsing. I don't know whether we have any dowsers here. So in addition to archaeology, we're also going to be talking about dowsing. Now, of course, dowsing, you may remember, rather like the wood that is used by farmers to locate water. This is one sort of dowsing. And the other sort of dowsing is with a pendulum. And so I learned a little bit about this, but I'm not quite good enough. So I got some of the leading real experts in dowsing from the British Society of Dowsers. One of them, Sarah Payne, who's also an intuitive, and she uses the dowsing to tell her when her intuitions are correct. And so using the dowsing over this concrete, Sarah spent about 3 months studying through the dowsing, and she reported these findings to me. And perhaps I'll read this out because you probably can't read it from the back. She said, and this is through verification through dowsing, the name is lignacite, a composite rock that's used in buildings for its strength and is produced using cement. It is composed of positive and negative quartz limestone, granite, shale, and sandstone. So that, I suppose, would be a conglomerate. It was produced by people who are no longer on Earth, using skills that we no longer have. Isn't that interesting? But she goes on. They made it by mixing up the raw materials, no fluid, and put it into a mold the shape of the required blocks. So that means they must have been eco-friendly. They didn't bring it from miles away. They did it on site. This was then packed, rammed down with wooden poles. A sheet of neutral or non-clear rutilated quartz, the same size as the mold, was then placed on top. Shall we continue? Yes. Okay. They allowed the sun to go through the quartz to the mold material for 10 seconds. Wow, so this must have been almost instantaneous. They did this double process 5 times, covering the rutilated quartz from the sun during the activation exercise. They then removed the quartz and removed the rock from the mold, and that's how it was made. So this pyramid could have been a very rapid process of construction. Maybe it didn't take years or centuries to build. By the sound of this, the cement blocks were created in a couple of minutes, which is quite amazing. But what about the purpose? The purpose of the concrete and the purpose of the pyramid. She went on and she said, by the way, can you read this from the back? Okay, well, I'll read it out anyway. I went on to ask about the purpose of the lignacite covering the pyramid and was told that its purpose was to transmit and magnify the energy created under the pyramid by the crossing streams, that's water, and the other technology to form a beam concentrated at the top of the pyramid. Wow. Some energy was used within the pyramid, but most of it was otherwise sent to the other pyramids on the planet by a sharing system whereby the energy was bounced off the atmosphere. This is incredible. And she did this reading quite separate from anything that I've told her about the pyramids. So using science now, using the science of acoustic outputs, of electromagnetism, energy signatures, temperature and geobiology, we can now see how this can be borne out through measuring the energies. The first experiment that was done by Dr. Slobodan Mizrak from Zagreb, he led a team of experts who measured both the electromagnetic radiation, and here you can see them doing it with their headphones. The team measured a very unusual 28 kilohertz, 28,000 hertz, ultrasound phenomenon exiting the top of the pyramid of the sun. And they also found something very interesting, that at the lower levels of the electromagnetic radiation, they also discovered a low infrasound fluctuation of about 7 to 10 hertz. And this is the frequency of the Schumann resonance, which is associated with alpha wave functioning, and also the pulsation of the planet Earth between the surface of the Earth and the ionosphere. And so an artist drew this. This is what they have found, a beam about 13 feet across that is constant, year after year, season after season. But the interesting thing is that we can't hear it, because at 28 kilohertz, it's above our hearing range. The highest would be about 21 or 22. So in the next short video, I'm going to be playing you a recording of Slobodan's engineering of the sound. So he actually brings it 6 octaves lower, so we can actually hear it. He uses something called a spectrum analyzer. So the actual sound you hear is 6 octaves down.
And then we first hear the normal, and then I'm very speeding it 6 octaves lower. So, and I'm putting here, you can see a spectrum analyzer. It's the same thing what you hear. So, now starts we start to go down. Yeah, it's now it's 6 octaves down. I can raise. You see here, if we zoom it in, this picture now live is the same picture down here, as you can see. You agree? So this is data sonification, and all these 4 electromagnetic channels It's important to have this. Yes, now you hear the both things, because that will explain the phase. Now you hear in the stereo image that it goes like this. And this is not caused by the machine. This is not the electrical problem. Okay? Now.
So you could hear there this electronic pulsation. And he says it doesn't come from a man-made machine. It is emanating from the pyramid itself. And he's used the same equipment on nearby natural hills, and there's nothing. Because, as I said, the Earth pulsates at about 7-8 hertz. This is at 28 kilohertz. The interesting thing is that we believe that this is a carrier wave, a signal wave, that's capable of transmitting information from planet Earth up into the universe. It's been replicated many times by different teams. So how are the pyramids able to beam energy and receive it from the ionosphere, and for what purpose? That's the question. We believe that the beam isn't just a straight beam, but actually it's rather like a vortex going up in a circular, ascending motion. This is a slightly complex diagram, but it shows the potential functioning mechanism. This double alternating energetic vortex going up, and as it goes up in its spiral, it actually increases in strength. You know, at school, we learned that the energy coming from a device or a point of source diminishes over space, rather like a torch. But in this case, we're finding that the strength increases with height. And this is due to the very structure of the alternating energy vortices. It's rather like seeing water going down a plug hole, but going up. It uses natural logarithms, like the Fibonacci sequence, the number pi, or phi. And also, the author of this chart points out that it is multi-dimensional in its resonance. So another team of scientists came and said, well, if this is indeed the case, we need to measure, maybe we can put an impulse of energy from the top into the pyramid and see what happens, what comes out. So they've set up their equipment, and 52 hours of sending in this impulse of about 1.5 volts, they found that the energy returned about 4 to 10 times in greater strength. And by using analysis, quite complex analysis, they calculated that the impulse goes down deeper than the pyramid, much, much, much deeper, right into the crust of the earth, about 2 miles down, and then it bounces up, gets magnified by the pyramid, and come back up at about 10 kilowatts. So in other words, this structure, this pyramid, is an energy machine, creating vast amounts of energy. But I think it is also rather like this diagram portrays, as above, so below. It is indeed connecting, according to this hypothesis, the universe with the planet Earth. And why not? Why should the planet Earth be alone in the universe? Why shouldn't there be areas of the planet that are connecting our planet, the life on this planet, to the center of the galaxy? Dr. Harry Oldfield, with his PIP camera, polycontrast interference photography, was able to measure in another way the energy coming. By the way, PIP detects and measures the interaction between photons and any present energy fields. So what this photograph is showing is energy fields that are coming out from the top and the sides of the pyramid, contrasting against a natural hill where the energy rises horizontally. We're finding that the energy is rising vertically. And in this brief video, we can also see a little plasma ball. Can you see that? And now it's flying away. Also, we hired a small aircraft and used the georadar camera that's used for exploration of gold mines and coal seams. It can actually penetrate about 400 to 500 meters below the surface of the Earth. And the resulting captures from that georadar camera found 7 levels of passageways inside the Pyramid of the Sun, also with a number of chambers which appear as the circular here. And so, of course, we think of the 7 chakras, whatever, but our hope is to be able to enter the pyramid not by breaking through the concrete, which even with modern equipment we can't do. It's too strong. But by entering it through tunnels that are connecting the pyramids in the valley with each other. Here's a little diagram of the tunnel starting about 2 kilometers away. So a bunch of heroes from England went out there about 4 years ago. There's me on the left with my lovely wife, who's here in the audience today, Jackie. And we went down and started to work and to experience these tunnels. Now, you might think, oh, they're just tunnels connecting structures, but these tunnels have their own incredible story to tell. The reason Sam Osmanagic will explain.
Entered the Underground Labyrinth run. From this place to the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun is 2.5 kilometers. In the last 7 years, we have cleaned and secured, using the wooden support, approximately 600 meters. So it is more than 2 kilometers to go to reach the pyramid.
I should have warned you. I wanted to tell you something that was moving. Did you see it? There was a little ball of light. I'm going to talk about this later on. There are no insects in these tunnels, and so if you saw a little flash, that was a little ball of light. Coming back to the story, when we first started working in these tunnels, we found that very strange, because obviously there were a number of tunnels, but they'd been force-filled. Can you see that? And also there were a number of dry walls. Dry just means there was no cement. Of these river stones blocking or sealing the entrance to some of the tunnels. What was behind them? Why had they been filled? So our job as volunteers was to remove this filling so that we could proceed along these tunnels, hopefully in the direction of the pyramid. So here am I with the usual smile. The interesting thing I've got to tell you, why am I smiling? Just to be in these tunnels, you get very high on oxygen. There's a tremendously high concentration of oxygen in these tunnels. They're bacteria-free, so you're not breathing any harmful bacteria. There's ease of breathing. Anyone with asthma or breathing difficulties, suddenly your breathing channels open up. There is, in fact, a self-regulating fresh air system. How does it work? It's amazing. And, of course, this sense of euphoria. So I was walking around with my wheelbarrow smiling like a Cheshire cat. Of course, the moment I looked up at the ceiling a few inches above my head, I realized I was standing 25 meters under the ground, and I thought, any moment now I'm going to feel claustrophobic. But at the moment that I thought, I should start panicking, at that exact moment, that feeling lifted. And it's almost like, a breathing in the wonderful cool air, that a presence came to me and held me to say, you're safe in here. You're being held. And so since then, I had no fear of claustrophobia. So this is our work. Sometimes you can see here that the tunnels are very humid. There's a lot of water density. Now, what we actually found is, again, we found some organic material, some carbon. It was dated this time by the Institute of Physics in Poland about 4,600 years ago. So something happened about that time that caused the culture that was in Bosnia around that time to completely fill the tunnels, to close them down, to make them inaccessible. It's a mystery why. But let's move on. Once we've cleared, we found that the original structure of the tunnels had this perfect egg-shaped structure that actually is very strong. If you know that an eggshell can be very strong. It withstands earthquakes. The walls don't fall in. They've been this shape for, we believe, thousands of years, perhaps as old as the pyramids themselves, because we believe actually they extracted the conglomerate from the tunnels to form the concrete. So as I walked deeper and deeper into the tunnel, I was able to breathe more easily. In fact, there's a kind of sweet fragrance to the air, especially between the junctions, and a slight breeze, a discernible breeze. But with measurements, we actually found that the ionic concentration of the air was increasing. It was going up and up and up as you go deeper and deeper into the tunnels. I'm sure, you know, if you've been by the ocean, in a forest after a rainstorm, there's this wonderful, energetic feeling. This is the ion. This is the ionic concentration of air. In this room, probably we've got about 100 to 150 particles of negative ions per cubic centimeter. But the study showed that the concentration of negative ions per cubic centimeter was actually up to 17,000, sometimes even higher, up to about 40,000 per cubic centimeter. And you can see, and now this must be very difficult to read from the back, so I'll read it at the top. Sarajevo city center near the Hotel Inn, Holiday Inn, 400. And then we enter the tunnels, and it goes down to 150. It was very foggy weather. And then up again at the entrance. And then as we get progressively further into the tunnels, we get readings of 9,000 to 17,000. Now, this means that the ionic concentration of the air is suffusing the bloodstream with oxygen, enriching the oxygen being fed into the brain. So we're feeling awake, alert. Any tension or anxiety is just dropping away, and we're feeling energetic, happy, and jubilant. There are some of the tunnels that are filled with water, that are closed off. We don't let people go there. This is a photograph, and a little orb has come to say hello just in the top left-hand corner. And we can see very clearly that these tunnels are artificially dug. They're artificially created. You can see the canal in the center there. Dr. Emoto's son came to visit, and he took some samples of the water and came back with this structure. And it shows a very energetic tree formation. And as you know, water carries information. Depending on how we treat water, how we behave towards the water, and the feelings we hold towards the water, the more they're able to give us health and happiness. Also, as I already mentioned about the Schumann resonance of this low infrasound. By the way, infrasound is the level that whales communicate with whale song. Elephants, rhinoceri, communicate over hundreds of miles through their feet using infrasound. And this is really, this Schumann resonance, this deep, low bass electromagnetic frequency is ideal for spiritual, mental, and physical development. So in other words, just to be in these tunnels is an experience in themselves. And it's very interesting when crowds of tourists come through, and they have perfume on and they're talking and everything. We found that actually the ionic count drops again. And then after they leave, we come back in the evening and it's come back up. So in other words, it's regenerating, not just to the whole tunnel system, but also in the specific areas where the tourists have been. It regenerates. So we seem to have the indication that in the tunnels there is an intelligent controlling system or a process. So are we observing artificial technology? Or are we observing naturally occurring technology? But are they any different? When we create this bridge by working and connect with our ancient ancestors, I get the feeling that they had very full consciousness and were able or had the ability to create technologies that worked perfectly with Mother Earth. They weren't really artificial technologies at all, but simply to amplify or magnify the invisible energies that were already there. So really a perfectly benign and harmonious technology. Another area of technology that was studied was the bovis, the vibrational scale. And the bovis, named after André Bovis, studies the strength or vitality of cosmic telluric energy inherent in a location or a place. And they found, for example, once you get up to 6,500, that's a healthy level of the telluric energy for the body. If you eat raw vegetables or raw fruits, that's up to about 9,000. 10,000, and we find that it's a place of power. 14,000 is in the ethereal range. And so here we're getting measurements of from 25,000 even up to 50,000. 50,000 is found in the energy beam. And as we're proceeding, we're also finding other artifacts that are quite incredible. You see here that the volunteers have unearthed some sort of round stone. It is, in fact, as we dug, a ceramic sculpture, not artificial, but actually a poly ceramic sculpture. And we found that it's actually hollow. And there's a base and a lid, and it's placed on a platform. And underneath that platform, many feet below, are crossing streams of water. And you know what happens when streams cross, rivers cross? Energy is produced. That energy is absorbed into these megaliths. And then we found that there is, in fact, something inside. Found using a georadar camera that there seems to be some sort of crystal vibrating inside. So here we have, what we're seeing is an ancient technology of transforming the energy of water into electromagnetic energy and then surrounding the tunnels with this energy. And you can, just to sit around these megaliths, you can really feel the energy emanating from them. It's a great place to meditate. Here's another one, an egg-shaped one. And can you just see there's that little seam, that little crack where the top is placed. And you can see just where his hand is, there are a number of undulations on this megalith, this sculpture. And we believe that could be a representation of the topological formation of the hills of the valley. It could perhaps be a 3D map. But being an avid explorer with my light and GoPro camera, I was able to enter into some of the most secret places in the tunnels. and we found even more dry walls. These are quite extraordinary. The silence, here I was the only person there, is quite extraordinary. And the water here is completely pure. It's drinkable, even though it's been sitting there for maybe 10,000 years or more. And every time I look at this, I keep on thinking I see faces in the stones. It's really amazing. But let's move on due to time.
It's an active energy generating system, and it seems to me that it dates from a time where all of the Earth was actually more energetic. Orbs, there's flash orbs that I call comet orbs. They appear very short in your footage and very flashy. There's needles, that is probably fast traveling flash orbs. There's mists that travel as a conglomerate together. There's what I call guardians, huge round mist shapes at the water holes. They appear only in the footage, you don't see the mist. And there's a purple beam that seems to be an activation of some sort. So this is what I call the purple beams or rays. It's definitely another light phenomenon than the orbing.
Yes, orbs, light phenomenon. This is another incredible energy artifact that is presenting itself in these tunnels. They are observable on still cameras, on movie cameras, on video image. So scientifically, we looked at about 300 of these photographs and videos, and we very carefully eliminated those with lens flare, light refraction, lens emissions, operator error, and we still found about 170 that are completely unexplainable through conventional science. Also, this was consistent across devices, different cameras owned by different people. We found that those energy beams, those energy orbs, are actually moving, and moving very fast, about 900 kilometers an hour. Let's just look at some. Can you see above the man in the center? Here it is. And Birgit from Spain, wherever I took a photo of her, there was always an orb. They loved her. Here's another one close to her. There we are in the tunnel, enlarged. And finally, when we opened a new chamber and discovered it, it seemed like we were releasing hundreds of thousands of orbs. There are other sorts of light phenomenon. This is the moving lights. Now, you might think, oh, someone's just waved a torch. But actually, they didn't. You look very carefully at the background. The background's in perfect focus. The camera is not moving. We didn't see this with our naked eye. But several cameras recorded light like this. We think we have an answer, but it takes us into quantum physics. Looking up at the ceiling, this is the ceiling of the tunnels. When we look very closely with a very expensive camera, we can see the drops of water forming. And at the beginning, we see the normal formation of a drop of water, the usual water flow. Then we notice that something is forming inside the droplet. These are spherical objects of light. First 1, then 2, then 8. It's as if they're being born. Let's look a little closer. They're just tiny dots, even closer. There, can you see them? These little tiny dots are emerging from the drop. And when we magnify them still further, we find that they are the baby or the beginnings of the concentric circles of orbs. But we don't just deal with light, we also deal with rock and stones. We found about 2,700 different artifacts that could perhaps be used. One of them is, I believe, could be our Rosetta Stone. We call it the Heart Stone. And we believe that this links culture and technology and phenomena. Do you see here that it's a little unfocused, but we can see that there is, on the bottom left-hand corner, it's better on my screen here, a concentric circle in different parts. In fact, a book has been written by Judith Mann and Julia Lincoln, who actually studied it under different light conditions. What actually happened is that someone brought this stone and washed it, and that signature, that pattern, emerged after it had been moistened. And so she studied under different light conditions, and here it is showing that a heat energy pattern. So this is not just painted on, but it seems to have an intrinsic energy pattern inherent or intrinsic to the stone itself. Here it is again under different light, and under this light it seems to be emanating power or energy. And again under a different light, the pattern comes back. I found this just the other day. This is the emblem of the first king of Bosnia in the 14th century. And it shows the snake, and we believe that the snake's body is the river that goes through the valley. And out of the mouth, we see something that looks like an egg split in two or a heart stone. And I'm wondering whether it's saying, find the heart stone. But just in the last 2 minutes of my talk, I want to briefly show you that there is also a very intrinsic and articulate language that we've discovered. This is the language of runes, inscriptions. And these runes can be very much associated or interpreted by studying the ancient runes. This is the book called Rune Law, for example, where we can actually study some of the runes and find meaning. This is the Laguz, which talks about the underlying unconscious water. This is the Tiwas that talks about the transmutation of the individual into the universal. And lastly, the Kinaz, which is all about direction and knowledge.
On this block, we can see carvings. Some of them remind us on runes, on the runic writing.
And here are the runes that Sam is talking about. These runes are a little different from the ones I showed earlier because they are in a straight line, as if they are a sentence. So taking the ancient esoteric meaning and providing a translation, which is difficult because it's so multidimensional, that the experts in runes came up with a translation, a possible translation. And here it is. It says, the gateway is closed. We are at a standstill. We'll have to act as warriors to defend until we can move again through the Stargate. I think that this inscription was made when the tunnels were closed down and blocked. Something was happening on our planet at that time that caused them to close down the tunnels and the energy being produced in these tunnels and the pyramids. And this, to me, confirms that the energy beam of the pyramid that we talked about earlier could indeed be a carrier signal that perhaps could carry not only sound, fluctuation, vibration, but also information, and perhaps on top of that carrier signal, perhaps even sentient beings. So is this whole valley perhaps a stargate? One of my last slides, coming just to my last 2 slides now. We've been reading recently about the Hadron Collider in Geneva at the Center for European Research, and how they believe through the discovery of the subparticles in the Hadron Collider that we are at the point of being able to enter, communicate, or discover other dimensions at the quantum level. But you know, I ask myself, in our present society, do we really have the spiritual consciousness to administer this knowledge? And that's why this project is so important, because of all the hundreds and thousands of volunteers that have come who've been able to work on excavating the Bosnian pyramids, just by touching the soil, by communicating, even if we don't realize we're communicating with the stones, the energies, the light forms, we are in a way connecting with an ancient civilization that was fully conscious and had a very deep spiritual understanding of technology and the use of energy. And I believe that it's by connecting to our past that we will be able, or it helps us, to remember as a species living at a time when we had full consciousness. And so we've come to the end of our hour. I really appreciate your attention, and I don't know whether we have any time for questions, probably not, but I'll always be around. And thank you again so much, and please come to Bosnia.
Thank you.